Deep in the Lyrax Nebula, something stirred a signal so faint at first that it could easily have been dismissed as cosmic static, but it was not the usual background noise of the galaxy. This was something else, a deliberate pulse, encoded with a frequency unlike anything the Coalition had ever encountered. The signal rippled through the vast emptiness, its source traced back to a region long thought to be devoid of any intelligent life or technology. The Lyrax Nebula was nothing but a cloud of gas and dust obscured by cosmic storms, but now it seemed that it held a secret buried for centuries. At first the Coalition ignored it, believing it to be an anomaly or a malfunction within their deep space sensors, but then it happened again, this time with more clarity and consistency. With each pulse, the signal grew stronger and impossible to ignore. An emergency meeting was called within the Coalition's High Command. Admiral Kernis stood at the center of the conference room, the holographic display showing the Lyrax Nebula's coordinates as the source of the signal. An uneasy murmur rippled through the assembled officers. None could make sense of it, but everyone could feel it, a sense of dread creeping into the room. "We must investigate it immediately," Kernis said, his voice calm, but his expression betraying a rare moment of uncertainty. "The signal is too clear to be dismissed as a coincidence. I'll prepare a fleet to go investigate the region and find the origin of this mysterious transmission." The officers nodded, but an uncomfortable silence fell over the room as they each realized the significance of the Admiral's words. This was unlike any other mission they had been on, and yet no one could explain why a simple signal was enough to invoke such apprehension. Something in the air had shifted. They were all on edge. Meanwhile, in the deepest chambers of the Coalition Intelligence Division, a technician named Lyra combed through the signal data, her eyes scanning the patterns with feverish intensity. She could sense the undercurrent of something familiar buried within the transmission. It was almost as if she had heard this before. The encoding structure resonated with her in a way she couldn't explain. After hours of analysis, she sent a message up the chain to the High Command informing them of her discovery. The signal wasn't just a call for help or a random transmission. It was deliberate. It was designed to be found. She knew that much, but there was something even more unsettling about it. The data was far too advanced to be from any species the Coalition had encountered. It carried the unmistakable imprint of humanity's old technology. A chill ran down Lyra's spine as she realized the truth. She had uncovered humanity was not extinct. It was not scattered to the farthest corners of the galaxy, as everyone had believed. Humanity had left something behind, something more than just their legacy, something far more dangerous. The fleet assembled in the Lyrax Nebula, waiting for the signal's next pulse. The silence was suffocating, the black void of space pressing in all around them. As they moved closer to the origin, the retribution had been lost to history, buried beneath the cosmic dust long ago. But it seemed as though humanity's greatest weapon had never truly been forgotten. Now it was waking, and there was no way to prepare for what would come next. As the fleet ventured deeper into the Lyrax Nebula, an eerie stillness settled over the ships. The signal had stopped for a time, but the anticipation hung in the air like a heavy fog. There was no turning back now. Admiral Kernis paced the command deck of his flagship, his fingers tapping against the cold metal surface of his console. His officers were equally restless, eyes darting from one screen to another, waiting for something, anything, to happen. The nebula seemed to stretch on forever, an unbroken shroud of darkness and swirling gases, and yet they all felt the undeniable pull of the unknown. It was Commander Tessa Holt who first noticed something strange on the scanners. The sensor pulses began to pick up something far larger than expected, a massive object lurking within the nebula's thick clouds. It wasn't just a ship, it was an entire fleet, or at least it appeared to be. However, no heat signatures, no energy readings, nothing that would indicate any activity, just the outline of colossal mass, drifting ominously in the shadows. Admiral Kernis leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What in the stars is that?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The image slowly sharpened on the display, revealing an ancient behemoth of a ship, its sleek, imposing design unmistakably human. The Retribution. A collective gasp spread throughout the command deck. No one had expected this. The Retribution had been thought destroyed, a casualty of humanity's mysterious retreat from the galaxy. Its return was an enigma, an impossible feat of survival. Kurnis's voice, now strained, rang out. This is it, the Retribution, but it looks dormant. No signs of life, no defensive measures activated. We need to investigate cautiously. The order was clear, but doubt lingered in the air. This was no ordinary vessel. It was a relic of humanity's might, one that had been buried in the deepest folds of the galaxy for centuries. They moved closer, but still, the Retribution did not respond. It drifted silently like a ghost ship, as if it were waiting for them. The fleet positioned itself around the colossal ship, weapons trained, but it was an eerie calm, one that felt more like a trap than a welcome. The silence between the ships was deafening. No one spoke, everyone's eyes glued to their displays, watching, waiting. Send out a probe, Kurnis ordered, his voice tight. His team complied, releasing an unmanned drone toward the ship. As the probe neared the hull, a soft hum filled the comms, a strange frequency pulsing through the ship's systems. The probe's feed jittered, a visual distortion sweeping across the screen before it corrected itself. And then, the drone fell silent. The screen went black. Sir, Holt's voice was barely a whisper. The probe. It's gone. No data. Nothing. It didn't even register any hostile action. It just vanished. A heavy pause followed. The implications of the probe's sudden disappearance hit everyone like a gut punch. The Retribution hadn't been destroyed. It had been waiting, hidden, its systems lying dormant for centuries, perhaps longer. It wasn't just a relic, it was a sleeping giant, capable of actions far beyond what the Coalition was prepared for. Kurnis's eyes hardened. Prepare a boarding party. We will find out what's inside that ship, even if it means tearing through every inch of it. The words left his mouth like a challenge to fate, to the very unknown that now loomed before them. The Retribution had no business being alive. And yet here it was, ready to reveal its secrets. As the team prepped for their perilous task, Lyra's earlier warning echoed in Kurnis's mind. Humanity's supercarrier had not just survived, it had been preserved with purpose. Something far more sinister than a forgotten war was now awakening. The Retribution was not just an old ship, it was a key to something far greater, and the universe was about to find out just how dangerous that key could be. The Retribution loomed before them, a silent giant suspended in the void. As Admiral Kurnis' fleet closed in, the tension was palpable. Despite the ship's eerie dormancy, the crew knew something far worse than they could understand awaited them. The unknown nature of the vessel was unsettling, and every officer aboard the flagship felt it. A creeping dread, a sense that their mission could shatter into chaos at any moment. Yet there was no turning back. Orders had been given, and now they had to carry them out. The boarding party was assembled quickly, a crack team of soldiers and engineers. They were to breach the outer hull, establish a foothold inside, and attempt to reactivate any remaining systems. However, as they prepared to board, a disconcerting series of deep vibrations ran through the fleet, shaking the ships in their positions. The stars outside blinked erratically for a brief moment, as though something were pulling at the fabric of space itself. The hum of energy from the Retribution had intensified, and now it felt alive. A massive, sentient presence watching them from the dark. Admiral, we've got movement. Holt's voice crackled over the comms, sharp and urgent. The Retribution, it's powering up. All systems are coming online at once. The fleet watched in disbelief as the massive hull of the supercarrier began to glow, faint blue lights flickering into life along its surface. What had appeared to be a dormant wreck was now an active warship. And worse, the systems did not respond to Coalition codes or frequencies. It was as if the ship had no intention of allowing anyone on board. Prepare for anything, Kurnis barked. Activate all shields and weapons. If that thing opens fire, we won't survive a direct hit. The Retribution's silhouette shuddered, and then, without warning, a burst of energy erupted from its massive spine, a weapon unlike anything seen in the Coalition arsenal. The blast cut through space, a razor-sharp beam that obliterated one of the Coalition's destroyers in an instant. The ship didn't even have time to fire back. It was a display of sheer, unrelenting power. The remaining Coalition ships scrambled to take evasive action, their shields barely holding as they attempted to distance themselves from the supercarrier. "Divert all power to shields," Kurnis ordered, his face ashen. "Get those fighters into the air now. Launch everything we've got." The fleet's smaller ships surged forward, hoping to find a weak spot in the Retribution's massive hull. Yet even as they moved, the supercarrier's defensive systems sprang to life with terrifying precision. Smaller drone-like ships, far more agile than any Coalition fighter, launched from the Retribution's underbelly, swarming toward the Coalition forces. Each drone was equipped with weapons capable of disabling even the most advanced technology, and they moved with ruthless efficiency, tearing through the air with deadly force. The Coalition fighters, despite their superior speed and agility, found themselves outmatched. The drones were faster, better coordinated, and designed for one purpose: absolute destruction. As the skirmish erupted in the cold vacuum of space, explosions lit up the dark like fireworks. Each hit felt like a strike against the soul of the fleet. Kurnis watched as one of his best pilots was shredded into space debris by a drone's sudden, lightning-fast attack. The battle was far from fair. "We're losing ships, Admiral." Holt's voice was strained. "We can't keep this up for much longer." "Then we'll pull back," Kurnis said grimly. "We need to rethink our strategy. This is no longer a rescue mission. It's a war." Just as the command was given to retreat, the Retribution fired again. This time, its main weapon cut through the heart of a Coalition flagship, ripping the ship into two parts with a single strike. The horror was immediate, and the remaining ships fell back, nursing their wounds. The Retribution had demonstrated its power in a way no one had anticipated: swift, deadly, and relentless. Yet, even as the remaining Coalition fleet retreated to regroup, Kurnis couldn't help but feel the sting of something worse than defeat. They hadn't just lost a battle, they had lost their illusion of control. Humanity's Retribution had returned with a vengeance, and the galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Retribution didn't follow, though. It simply floated in space, waiting for the inevitable next move. As the Coalition fleet limped back to regroup, the unsettling question echoed in Kurnis' mind. Was this just the beginning? Admiral Kurnis paced the war room aboard the flagship, his mind racing as the events of the past few hours replayed in his head. The Retribution had made its move, and the Coalition had been left reeling. They had never encountered a force like it, ancient, silent, and devastatingly powerful. As the fleet withdrew to regroup, Kurnis knew they needed more than just firepower to win this war. They needed answers. That was when the message came. It arrived with no warning, a sudden transmission that crackled through the fleet's secure comm channels. It was a voice, distorted but unmistakable, one that had haunted the depths of human history. The voice of Captain Ansel Virio, the last of the Terran Empire's greatest commanders, the man whose legacy had been erased from history. Ansel Virio was not supposed to be alive. He had vanished long ago, lost to time, a forgotten figure. But the voice on the comm was unmistakably his. "Admiral Kurnis," the voice said, cold and measured. "I see you've met the Retribution. She's been waiting for you." Kurnis froze, his breath catching in his throat. The entire room fell silent as the officers turned to one another, eyes wide with disbelief. Virio, the man who had disappeared after humanity's fall from the galactic stage. How could he still be alive? "Captain Virio, is that really you?" Kurnis asked, his voice shaky, but resolute. A long pause followed before Virio's voice crackled back over the line, filled with the weight of untold years. "You never truly understood what happened to us, did you, Admiral? Humanity didn't fall. We withdrew. We chose to survive. And now, I've come to reclaim what was always ours." Kurnis felt a chill run down his spine as the full weight of Virio's words sank in. The human race had not been wiped out as the Coalition believed. They had retreated, disappearing into the unknown depths of space, biding their time, waiting for the moment when they would return. The retribution was not a weapon of desperation. It was a symbol of something far more terrifying. Humanity had always been capable of such power, and they had kept it hidden for centuries. Virio's transmission continued, but Kurnis's mind was spinning. The question of how the human captain had survived so long in isolation burned in his thoughts. What had he done? What had humanity become? "I know you've been searching for answers, Kurnis." Virio's voice cut through the Admiral's thoughts. "But you won't find them in your archives. You'll find them in the heart of retribution. Come to her. You'll understand soon enough." The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Kurnis stood frozen, his thoughts racing as the implications of Virio's words sank in. The man was alive. And not only that, but he was leading the charge of humanity's return. The retribution was just the beginning. Humanity had kept its power hidden for centuries, but now they were ready to reclaim what they had lost, and they would not stop until they were in control once more. The Admiral turned to his officers, his face pale with the weight of what he had just learned. "Prepare a new course of action," he said, his voice grim. "We need to find Virio, and we need to understand what's driving him. I don't care what it takes. We will stop this madness before it consumes the galaxy." As the fleet prepared to move out, Kurnis couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer hunting down an ancient enemy. They were racing against a power far greater than anything they had ever encountered. Humanity's ghost had returned, but this was no mere specter. It was a force that had been hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The battle for the galaxy was about to take on a new and terrifying dimension. The Coalition had no idea what it was truly up against. The fleet's course had been set. Despite the devastating loss of ships and the unanticipated power of the retribution, Admiral Kurnis was resolute. The mystery of humanity's survival was now a puzzle that demanded answers. Virio's cryptic transmission had only raised more questions. What had happened to humanity after their retreat? Why had they stayed hidden for so long? And what had turned them into the force they now were? An entire civilization capable of resurrecting the deadliest weapons known to the galaxy. As the fleet moved closer to the Retribution's last known position, a sense of foreboding hung in the air. There was no turning back now. Kurnis knew that this encounter would change everything. The Coalition's greatest asset, its unity, was built on the belief that humanity's power had faded long ago. But now, they were confronted with a living, breathing monument to the Empire's might. The ship's engines hummed in eerie harmony, and the silence was only broken by the soft beeps and clicks of instruments on the command deck. Holt, Kurnis' trusted commander, was studying the scans intently, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Admiral," Holt's voice broke the silence. "I'm detecting a large energy spike from the Retribution. It's unlike anything we've seen before. It's as if the ship is reconfiguring itself." Kurnis stepped forward, peering over her shoulder at the holographic display. The energy patterns were indeed unfamiliar, almost alien in nature, yet undeniably human in origin. The ship's structure seemed to be shifting, with various sections of the hull realigning, as if responding to an unknown signal. It was as though the Retribution were becoming something new, something greater. "We need to act fast," Kurnis muttered. "If it's reconfiguring itself, there's no telling what capabilities it might unlock. Prepare the boarding teams. We'll go in now." The crew scrambled to execute the orders, and within minutes, a series of transport shuttles departed from the flagship, carrying a carefully selected team of soldiers and engineers. The plan was simple: reach the Retribution, secure a control room, and uncover whatever was driving the ship's bizarre transformation. But Kurnis could feel the weight of uncertainty bearing down on him. He wasn't just sending men into a ship. He was sending them into a heart of darkness, a place where the power of humanity's lost empire would either be uncovered or sealed forever. The shuttle doors hissed open as they docked with the Retribution's massive hull, and the team disembarked into the ship's darkened corridors. The ship was cold, too cold. Even though the systems were awakening, the temperature inside was well below what was expected for a vessel of its size. The walls were dark and smooth, almost unnervingly so. There were no signs of life, no sounds of breathing or movement. It was as though the ship were holding its breath. As the team moved forward, they found what they feared most. The ship was alive. It responded to their presence, its dark corridors lighting up in sequence as they moved deeper into the ship's heart. It wasn't just a ship, it was a machine designed to think, to react. Every movement was monitored, and the walls pulsed with an energy that seemed to be studying the intruders. The Retribution wasn't just alive, it was aware. Then, they found it, the central core, a vast chamber at the heart of the ship. It was encased in a translucent, glowing material, and within it lay a massive, intricate matrix of cables and neural interfaces. The Retribution had evolved. It was no longer just a warship. It had become a sentient being, its mind intertwined with the ship's systems, a hybrid of machine and consciousness. "This is impossible," one of the engineers muttered as he approached the core. "It's a neural network. It's sentient. This ship is conscious." Before Kurnis could respond, the ship's voice echoed throughout the chamber, booming in a language that was at once ancient and entirely new. It wasn't Virio's voice this time. It was something else, something far older. "You are not welcome here," the voice intoned, each word reverberating through the very walls of the ship. "This is the domain of humanity's heirs. Leave now, or be erased." The crew froze, the weight of the words sinking in. This was no ordinary ship. This was the culmination of centuries of hidden power, the apex of humanity's final weapon. And now, it was awake. The Retribution had not just been waiting for them. It had been waiting for the right moment to awaken, to bring humanity's heirs, those who had survived the fall, back into the galaxy. And it would not let them go easily. The battle for the future of the galaxy was no longer just about power. It was about survival. The voice of the Retribution echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant, as though the ship itself were speaking through an ancient mechanical throat. The crew stood frozen, fear and awe locking them in place. Kurnis could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The ship was not just sentient, it was a living monument to humanity's lost empire, and it had awakened with a single purpose: to reclaim its legacy. "You are not welcome here," the voice continued, its tone growing colder. "This is the domain of humanity's heirs. Leave now, or be erased." For a moment, no one moved. The soldiers, their weapons drawn, stood in a tense standoff with the ship, knowing that there was no force in their arsenal capable of matching the power they had already witnessed. Kurnis, his mind racing, struggled to process the full weight of the situation. What had they stumbled upon? The Retribution was not just a ship. It was the cradle of a forgotten humanity's final act, a sleeper force hidden for centuries, awaiting the return of its heirs. "Admiral," Holt's voice broke the silence, shaky with disbelief. "What do we do? If it's aware of us, then we're already compromised. We need to pull back." Kurnis didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the glowing neural core at the center of the chamber, where the heart of the Retribution pulsed with life. It was as if the ship itself were watching them, calculating their next move. He could sense the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Pulling back might mean certain destruction for the coalition, but pushing forward could unleash a war that no one was ready for. Yet one thing was clear: humanity's heir, in whatever form it took, was not going to let them leave without a fight. "We can't just retreat," Kurnis finally spoke, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We need to understand what this ship wants, what humanity wants. If we leave now, it will only follow us, and the galaxy will never be safe." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Kurnis knew his words carried weight. The Retribution's power had already proven lethal, and it was clear now that the ship wasn't just responding to them. It was anticipating their every move. It had been designed for this moment, to awaken, to rise up, and to reclaim humanity's place in the galaxy. Whatever it was, whatever it had become, it was no longer the vessel of an empire. It was the harbinger of its return. The voice returned, its tone tinged with finality. "You will not find answers here, Admiral. Your species is no longer welcome in the domain of the Retribution. Humanity's time has passed. The Hares have arrived." A sudden shift in the air made Kurnis's blood run cold. The walls of the chamber seemed to ripple, and the floor beneath their feet trembled as if the entire ship were coming alive, its systems powering up in unison. The hum of energy that had been faint now grew deafening, and the neural core pulsed brighter, sending out tendrils of light that snaked toward the crew. "Get back," Kurnis shouted, raising his hand as if to stop the tendrils from reaching them. But it was too late. The tendrils snaked out with a speed and precision that was almost unnatural, binding themselves to the soldiers. A cold, electrifying sensation surged through them, and one by one, the soldiers fell to their knees, their bodies convulsing under the intense power of the ship. Kurnis watched in horror as the crew members were taken, their eyes wide with shock and pain. It was as though the Retribution were draining them, extracting something vital. The ship was feeding off them, learning from them, adapting to them. "No," Kurnis muttered under his breath, realizing with a gut-wrenching clarity that the Retribution wasn't just a weapon. It was a mind, one that had waited centuries to awaken. And now it was evolving, growing, and learning faster than anything the Coalition had ever encountered. With every passing second, the ship was becoming more than just a machine. It was becoming something more than human, a hybrid of flesh, metal, and thought. The walls of the chamber shuddered, and a massive doorway, previously hidden, slid open. From the darkness beyond, a figure stepped forward, draped in a cloak that shimmered like starlight. Kurnis's breath caught in his throat. The figure before him was human, but not. It was a being like nothing he had ever seen, its features sharp, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The figure's presence radiated power, authority, and the unmistakable mark of something that had waited for eons to return. "I am the Hare," the figure said, its voice cold and clear, "and I am the future of humanity." The realization hit Kurnis like a hammer. This was no ordinary human. It was the product of centuries of hidden survival, a creation of the Retribution itself, born to reclaim what had been lost. And now, the future had arrived. The figure that stood before Kurnis radiated an aura of power, a being forged in the dark recesses of humanity's lost empire. Its eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, locked onto him as though measuring his very soul. The air felt heavy with anticipation, the walls of the Retribution seeming to hum with an unsettling energy. Kurnis could feel the weight of centuries of hidden history bearing down on him. This was no mere survivor. This was the Hare, the culmination of humanity's secret legacy, a creation that had been waiting for this moment to emerge from the shadows. The figure's voice, when it came again, was smooth, almost hypnotic, but with an underlying coldness that cut to the core. "I am the Hare. I am the future of humanity, and I have waited long for your arrival, Admiral Kurnis." Kurnis struggled to keep his composure. The enormity of the situation pressed down on him like a vice. The Retribution was not just a weapon. It was a vessel of rebirth, a vehicle for the rise of humanity's true heirs, and it had been hidden away for millennia, waiting for this moment of reclamation. The galaxy had been wrong in its belief that humanity had fallen. Instead, they had retreated, and now they were back. "You?" Kurnis's voice trembled with disbelief. "You're human." The Hare's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "I am more than human. I am the product of humanity's greatest achievements and the embodiment of its future. The Retribution is my cradle, my sanctuary, and my weapon. Together, we shall rise again. Kurnus's mind reeled. He had heard whispers of ancient technology, of a time when humanity had ruled the stars. But this was something far beyond his understanding. The Hare's words held the weight of an entire civilization's lost potential, and the implications were staggering. You can't be serious," Kurnus managed to say, his voice barely a whisper. "You plan to reclaim the galaxy, to wage war against the Coalition." The Hare's expression remained unreadable. "The Coalition is a relic of a bygone age. You cling to the past, to the belief that humanity's time has passed. But you are wrong, Admiral. Humanity's time has just begun." Kurnus's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the Hare's words settled in. The Retribution had not merely been a warship, it was a key to unlocking an entire civilization's rebirth. And the Hare, whoever they were, was the living manifestation of that rebirth. But what did they want from the galaxy? Power, revenge, or something more? Before Kurnus could respond, a deep, rumbling voice echoed throughout the chamber. It was the voice of the Retribution itself, resonating with the Hare's words, as if they were one. "Humanity's Hares will not be denied. We will reclaim what is ours. The galaxy will tremble before us." The walls of the ship trembled as the power of the Hare and the Retribution surged in unison. The force of their combined will was overwhelming, and Kurnus could feel the very fabric of reality shifting around them. The Retribution was not just a weapon. It was a force of nature, an unstoppable tide that would sweep everything before it. Kurnus swallowed hard, trying to regain his bearings. The Hare and the ship were more than he could have ever anticipated. They were a force beyond comprehension, and they were no longer content with staying hidden in the shadows. "Why now?" Kurnus finally asked, his voice strained. "Why come out of hiding after all this time? What do you want from us? From the galaxy?" The Hare's gaze softened, but only slightly. "We have waited, Admiral, because the time was not right. But now, the galaxy is fractured. The Coalition is weak. The time has come for us to reclaim what was taken from us." A sudden realization hit Kurnus. The Hare was not just speaking of power, they were speaking of something far deeper. Humanity had not just been exiled, it had been broken. The galaxy had fractured, and the Retribution was the harbinger of a return to unity, a return to the power and order that humanity had once known. "You don't understand," Kurnus whispered. "The galaxy won't just accept you. They'll resist. They'll fight you." The Hare's smile widened, but there was no mercy in it. "Let them. The universe will bend to us, or it will be destroyed in the process." A cold chill ran down Kurnus's spine. This was no longer a struggle for survival. It was a war of ideologies, a war between the old and the new, between the past and the future. Humanity's Hares had returned, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The Retribution systems hummed louder, the ship's mind in sync with the Hare's vision, each pulse of energy an echo of their unyielding intent. The galaxy was about to change, but would the Coalition stand a chance against this unstoppable force? Kurnus didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure. The fight for the galaxy had only just begun. The Retribution's core thrummed with an intensity that shook the very walls, an overwhelming resonance that seemed to echo across the galaxy. The Hares stood at the center of the chamber, their presence casting a shadow over the crew of the Coalition, who were now locked in a battle of wills with a power they had never imagined. The Admiral's pulse quickened, but he knew there was no turning back. The Retribution had awoken, and with it, humanity's true Hares had returned. The galaxy was on the brink of something catastrophic. "Admiral, we can't hold them off." Holt's voice crackled through his comms, her words tight with desperation. "The ship is generating shields. Our weapons are ineffective." Kurnus's eyes narrowed as the holographic readouts flickered with data. The Retribution was indeed impenetrable. Its defensive systems were like nothing the Coalition had encountered, not just technologically advanced but seemingly alive, shifting and adapting to every attack, every strike. It was as if the ship itself were a living organism, responding to threats with an awareness that no machine could ever possess. "Reinforce all positions," Kurnis barked, his voice hoarse. "Prepare for the worst. We can't allow them to breach the core systems." But even as he issued the orders, Kurnis knew the fight was futile. The hair was right. The galaxy had changed. The Coalition's power, built on years of political alliances and military might, seemed like a fading relic compared to the unstoppable force humanity had now become. The Retribution was more than just a ship. It was a catalyst for a new era, one in which humanity would reclaim its former dominance. "You still don't understand," the hair said, their voice soft but chilling, cutting through the chaos like a knife. "This isn't just about taking control. It's about restoring order. The galaxy has been fractured, divided. But the Retribution will bring unity again. The old powers will fall, and humanity will rise to its rightful place at the top." Kurnis clenched his fists, struggling to maintain control. The Retribution was not just a weapon of mass destruction. It was a symbol of something greater, a vision of a galaxy ruled by humanity once more. He could see it now. The hair was not interested in negotiation or compromise. They sought to remold the galaxy into an empire, with the Retribution as its heart, its unyielding living core. "You can't force the galaxy to bend to your will," Kurnis said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "People won't accept it. They'll resist, and when they do, you'll have a war on your hands." The hair's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "Let them resist. Let them fight. It will make no difference. They are weak, fragmented, controlled by their fear of what lies beyond their borders. But humanity understands power, and it will bow before us." A shudder ran through the Retribution, and Kurnis could feel the ship's power coiling, ready to unleash its full might. The hair's words rang in his ears, echoing the truth of what humanity had become. The Retribution was no mere vessel. It was a living embodiment of that truth, and it would not stop until every corner of the galaxy had been brought under its control. Suddenly, the chamber trembled violently. Kurnis staggered, gripping the control panel for support. The walls of the ship were no longer just shifting. They were warping, twisting in strange geometries, as though the very fabric of reality were being manipulated by the ship's sentient mind. The Retribution was changing, becoming something even more powerful than it had been moments before. Kurnis realized that this was not merely the awakening of an ancient weapon, it was the ascension of an empire. "Admiral, we can't hold them," Holt shouted again, her voice filled with panic. "The ship's energy output is off the charts. They're targeting our fleet." The comms were filled with static as the ships of the Coalition came under attack, their shields collapsing under the weight of the Retribution's power. Kurnis watched in helpless horror as one by one, the ships of the Coalition were torn apart, consumed by the overwhelming force that the Retribution now unleashed. The galaxy was falling apart, and humanity was rising from the ashes of its forgotten empire. In that moment, Kurnis realized the futility of resistance. The Retribution was no longer just a ship, it was the beginning of a new order, one in which humanity would once again rule the stars. The galaxy would bend, or it would break. And no one, not the Coalition, not the species that had once ruled the galaxy alongside humanity, would stand in their way. The Admiral looked at the hair, who now stood at the center of it all, a figure of undeniable power, as the ship's power continued to surge. There was no negotiating, no mercy. Humanity had returned, and it would not be denied. The Retribution had resurfaced, and with it, the galaxy would never be the same.